Zara Matthews stood in front of the mirror in the employee bathroom of the botanical garden, her hands gripping the porcelain sink so tightly her knuckles turned white. The interview was in 20 minutes, and her reflection looked like a stranger, someone trying too hard, someone pretending to be capable when she felt anything but. The position was for senior horticulturist, a role she'd dreamed about for years. But now that the moment had arrived, all she could hear was the voice in her head listing every reason she wasn't good enough. Her supervisor had nominated her personally, said she was the most talented person on the staff, but Zara couldn't see it. All she saw was a woman in a borrowed blazer that didn't quite fit, with dirt still under her fingernails despite 20 minutes of scrubbing. She splashed cold water on her face and took a breath. The gardens outside were her sanctuary, the place where she felt most herself, but this administrative building felt like enemy territory. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Maya wishing her luck, but Zara couldn't even muster the energy to respond. Instead, she stared at her reflection one more time and whispered the words that had become her mantra lately, though they brought no comfort. "I'm not confident enough." The interview went exactly as she feared. She stumbled over her words, downplayed her achievements, and watched as the panel's initial interest faded into polite disengagement. When they asked about her vision for expanding the tropical conservatory, she had brilliant ideas but presented them as suggestions, maybes, possibilities rather than the confident plan they wanted to hear. By the time she left, she knew she'd lost the position before they even deliberated. Zara retreated to the orchid house afterward, seeking solace among the delicate blooms she'd spent 3 years cultivating. This was where she belonged, hands in soil, coaxing life from seemingly impossible conditions, not in boardrooms or interviews. The orchids didn't judge her for her lack of confidence. They only responded to her care and knowledge. "Those are remarkable," she startled, nearly dropping the watering can. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the glass panels. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive charcoal suit that seemed completely out of place in the humid greenhouse. Dark hair, strong jawline, eyes that seemed to actually see her rather than look past her like most visitors did. "Thank you," Zara managed, setting down the watering can and wiping her hands on her work pants. "The Phalaenopsis collection is one of our best. Are you here for a tour? I think the next one starts in about 15 minutes at the main entrance." He stepped further inside and she noticed how carefully he moved, aware of the space he occupied. "Actually, I'm here to see the garden's director. Early, apparently. I'm James Quincy." The name hit her like a wave. James Quincy. The real estate developer who'd made headlines for the past 6 months. The man who wanted to buy the land adjacent to the botanical gardens to build luxury condominiums. The man every staff member had been taught to view as the enemy. "Oh," she said, unable to keep the coolness from her voice. "The meeting's in the administrative building. You're quite far from there." "I wanted to see the gardens first," he said, seemingly unbothered by her tone. "Understand what I'd be neighboring. These orchids, you grew these. I'm part of the team that maintains them. Don't do that." His voice was firm but not unkind. She blinked. "Do what? Diminish yourself? I watched you working before I spoke. The way you move around these plants, the way you examine each one, that's not maintenance. That's artistry. That's expertise." Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I just water them and make sure they have what they need." James moved closer to one of the hanging specimens, a rare blue orchid she'd spent 8 months nursing back to health after it arrived half dead from a collector. "This one's different from the others. The color's extraordinary." "That's a Vanda coeruleum," she said, unable to help herself. The passion crept into her voice despite her wariness. It's been on the endangered list. This particular plant was rescued from illegal trade. When it came to us, it had root rot and hadn't bloomed in over 2 years. Now it flowers twice a year. Because of you, because of proper care and conditions. Who provided that care? She hesitated. I did. Then because of you. He looked at her with an intensity that made her want to simultaneously run away and step closer. Why do you have such a hard time taking credit for your work? The question was too personal, too direct, especially from a stranger, especially from him. Mr. Quincy, your meeting, tell me about this place, he interrupted. Why it matters. I've read the reports, seen the numbers, heard the arguments, but tell me why you're here, why you do this. Zara should have refused, should have directed him to the administrative building and let the director handle this man who wanted to build where the gardens hoped to expand. But something in his expression, in the genuine curiosity in his eyes, made her pause. Because plants don't lie, she said quietly. They show you exactly what they need. If you pay attention, if you really see them, they'll tell you when they're thriving or struggling. There's no pretense. No politics. Just life trying to survive and flourish. And when you help something bloom that everyone else had given up on, she stopped, realizing she'd said too much. That's worth everything, James finished softly. Their eyes met, and Zara felt something shift in the humid air between them. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the moment. That's my assistant. I really am late now. He moved toward the door but paused. What's your name? Zara Matthews. Zara. He said it like he was testing how it felt. Thank you for this, for sharing your work with me. Then he was gone, leaving Zara standing among the orchids with her heart beating faster than it should. The next week brought the news she'd expected. She didn't get the promotion. The position went to someone with more confidence, they said, someone who presented a stronger vision. Zara nodded through the meeting with her supervisor, accepted the feedback about working on her self-presentation, and went back to her plants feeling both disappointed and relieved. At least in her current role, she could stay in the greenhouses. She could avoid the spotlight that made her feel so exposed. Maya tried to cheer her up that weekend with brunch and mimosas. You're too talented to keep hiding in those greenhouses, her friend insisted. You need to advocate for yourself. I'm not good at that, Zara said, pushing her eggs around her plate. Because you don't see yourself clearly. Remember in college when you won that award for your research and you were convinced it was a mistake? They had announced the wrong name before, once. They'd done it once 3 years before, and you were convinced they'd done it again, even when you were standing on stage holding the plaque. Maya leaned forward. Z, you're brilliant, you just don't believe it. Zara wanted to argue, but her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her check. Miss Matthews, this is James Quincy. I hope you don't mind I got your number from the garden's directory. I have a proposition for you. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? She stared at the message, her stomach doing an uncomfortable flip. Maya, reading over her shoulder, gasped. James Quincy, the developer, the insanely hot one from the newspaper photos. How do you know what he looks like? Everyone knows what he looks like. He's been called Seattle's most eligible bachelor about 1,000 times. Why is he texting you? I ran into him at the gardens last week. I don't know why he wants to meet. But even as she said it, unease crept through her. What if he wanted to pick her brain about the gardens? Get insider information for his development plans? Are you going to respond? Zara looked at the message again. The smart thing would be to decline. But that same curiosity that had made her talk to him in the orchid house pushed her fingers to type. What kind of proposition? The response came quickly. The kind best discussed in person. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Café Verdant on Pine Street. I promise it's worth your time." Against her better judgment, she agreed. Café Verdant was exactly the kind of place Zara would have chosen herself, a small corner shop with hanging plants in the windows and mismatched vintage furniture. She arrived early, ordered a chai latte, and claimed a table near the back, trying to calm her nerves. She changed outfits 4 times that morning, finally settling on jeans and a simple green blouse, feeling ridiculous for caring what she wore. James walked in at exactly 10, somehow making the small cafe feel smaller with his presence. He traded the suit for dark jeans and a gray Henley that showed off his athletic build. Several people glanced his way, recognition flickering across their faces. "Thank you for coming," he said, sitting across from her. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. Because of the development project, there was no point in lying. That's part of it," he nodded slowly. "I'm withdrawing from that project." Zara nearly dropped her cup. "What?" "After visiting the gardens, seeing what you've built there, understanding what expansion would mean for the community, I can't justify it. The land's more valuable as green space than as condominiums, at least in that location. I've already informed my partners." "I don't understand." "You've been pursuing this for months." "I pursue a lot of projects. Not all of them are the right call." He leaned back, studying her. "That's actually related to why I wanted to meet. I'm starting something new. A foundation focused on urban conservation and green spaces. I've spent 15 years building real estate, but lately, I've been wondering what I'm actually building toward. What legacy I'm leaving beyond glass and steel towers." Zara listened, not sure where this was going. "I want you to consult for the foundation," James continued. "Help us identify spaces that could be transformed into urban gardens, green sanctuaries in the city. Design the projects. You'd have complete creative control and a budget that would actually allow you to do things right." She stared at him. "You can't be serious." "Why not?" "Because you don't know me. You met me once. You saw me water some plants. I saw you bring something back from the edge of death through knowledge and care. I saw passion and expertise, and I did my research after we met. Your papers on drought-resistant urban landscaping have been cited by city planners across the country. You developed a composting system that 3 other botanical gardens have adopted. You're exceptional at what you do, Zara." "I'm not," she stopped, hearing his earlier words in the greenhouse. "Don't diminish yourself." "Exactly. Why me, though? There are more experienced people, people with bigger names." "Because when I asked you why you do this work, you didn't talk about career advancement or recognition. You talked about truth and life and helping things bloom. That's the foundation I want to build. Not one focused on optics or press releases, but one that actually makes a difference." He paused. "Also, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since last week." The last sentence hung between them, changing the entire conversation. Zara's heart stuttered. I don't think that's appropriate for a professional proposition," she managed. "You're right. I'm sorry. Forget I said that last part." But his eyes held hers, and she could see he didn't want her to forget it at all. "Just consider the consulting position. At least let me send you the details. I have a job. This would be freelance, evenings and weekends until you decide if you want to do it full time. Zara, I'm not trying to pressure you, but I watched you in that greenhouse. You were different there, confident, alive. Don't you want more opportunities to be that version of yourself?" She did. That was the terrifying part. She did want that, but wanting it felt dangerous, like reaching for something that would be yanked away the moment she got close. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's all I ask." He pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back. "My personal cell. Call me when you decide, or if you just want to talk about plants, or anything." After he left, Zara sat in the cafe for another hour, turning the card over in her hands. Maya was going to lose her mind when she heard about this. But more than that, Zara's own mind was spinning. A man she barely knew was offering her a dream opportunity and had basically admitted he was attracted to her. It was too much, too fast, too good to be real. She spent the next 3 days researching James Quincy obsessively. The internet told her he was 32, had built his commercial real estate company from the ground up after a brief stint in architecture, was worth an estimated $50 million, and had been linked romantically to various socialites and models over the years, though never seriously. Recent interviews showed a shift in his focus mentions of sustainability, of wanting his work to have meaning beyond profit margins. "You're overthinking this," Maya said when Zara showed up at her apartment with takeout and a laptop full of research. "He's offering you a job and maybe asking you out. Those are both good things. Are they? What if I fail? What if I take this consulting thing and I'm terrible at it and waste his money? What if you're amazing at it?" "I'm not confident enough," Zara said, and there it was again, that phrase that had become her shield and her prison. Maya set down her pad thai and looked at her seriously. "Where does this come from, Z? You're one of the smartest people I know. You're talented and kind and you work harder than anyone, so why don't you believe in yourself?" Zara was quiet for a long moment. "My mom," she said finally. "Everything I did was never quite good enough. I'd bring home an A, she'd ask why it wasn't an A+. I'd win second place, she'd focus on why not first. I think she thought she was pushing me to be better, but I just learned that I was always falling short, and that feeling never went away." "Your mom was wrong," Maya said firmly. "You know that, right? Intellectually, yes. But knowing something and feeling it are different things." That night, alone in her small apartment surrounded by the plants she'd collected over the years, Zara looked at James's card again. She thought about the orchid house, about how she felt when she was working with her hands in the soil, solving problems, creating beauty. She thought about James's words. "Don't you want more opportunities to be that version of yourself?" She picked up her phone and typed before she could second-guess herself. "Okay, send me the details about the consulting position." His response came within minutes. "I'll email everything tomorrow. Thank you, Zara. You won't regret this." The project details arrived the next morning, and they were even better than she'd imagined. James wanted to transform vacant lots and neglected spaces throughout the city into pocket gardens and green spaces. The budget was generous, the timeline realistic, and the creative freedom genuine. He'd already identified 5 potential sites and wanted her input on feasibility and design. They met at the first location the following Saturday, a 1/4-acre lot in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The space was currently filled with broken concrete and weeds, bordered by a chain-link fence covered in faded graffiti. "I know it doesn't look like much," James said as they stood surveying the space, but Zara was already seeing possibilities. "The light exposure is good. Southern-facing, mostly unobstructed. The soil will need serious remediation, but it's doable." She walked the perimeter, her mind working. "We could do raised beds here for a community vegetable garden, native wildflowers along this section to attract pollinators. Maybe a small seating area in the corner with shade trees." When she looked back at James, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked self-consciously. "You're doing it again. Being confident. You should see yourself right now, you're practically glowing." She felt her cheeks warm. "I just get excited about this stuff. I know. It's incredible to watch." He moved closer, standing beside her as they looked at the empty lot. "Tell me more. What would you plant?" They spent the next 2 hours walking the space as Zara outlined her vision. growing more animated as James asked questions and offered ideas. He understood more than she'd expected. His architecture background gave him an eye for spatial design, and he'd clearly done research on sustainable landscaping. When she mentioned concerns about water management, he immediately suggested solutions. When she worried about maintenance costs, he assured her the foundation's budget included long-term care. "This could really work," she said finally, surprised by her own conviction. "It will work. With you leading the design, how could it not?" They grabbed lunch at a taqueria nearby, sitting at a wobbly outdoor table. The conversation flowed easily, moving from work to other topics. She learned he'd grown up middle class, the son of a contractor and a teacher, that he'd built his first company by renovating foreclosed properties during the recession. He was direct about his wealth now, but talked about it like a responsibility rather than a trophy. "Money changes things," he said. "It gives you opportunities and options, but it also distances you from people. Everyone wants something, or they assume you think you're better than them. It gets lonely." "Is that why you're starting this foundation, to feel less lonely?" "Maybe partly," he admitted, "but mostly because I realized I've spent years building things that don't actually matter to me. Buildings I'll never spend time in, developments that serve people who already have everything. I want to build something that makes a difference. Something I can be proud of." "I think that's good," Zara said softly. "It's good to want your work to mean something." "What does your work mean to you?" She thought about it. "It means I'm creating something beautiful and alive. It means I'm contributing to something larger than myself. Plants produce oxygen, support ecosystems, bring people peace. When I cultivate a garden, I'm giving something to the world. Even if I don't get recognition for it, I know it matters." "But you deserve recognition," James said. "You deserve to be seen for what you contribute." "I'm not good at being seen." "Why not?" "Because being seen means being judged, and I already judge myself harshly enough." James reached across the table, his hand covering hers. The touch was warm, solid, surprising. What if being seen meant being appreciated, valued, celebrated? Zara's breath caught. "I don't know how to believe that." "Then let me believe it for you until you can believe it yourself." Over the next month, they fell into a routine. Weekends were spent visiting potential garden sites. Weekday evenings involved planning sessions at coffee shops or over dinner. James was respectful of her time, always asking rather than assuming she was available, always listening when she spoke. But the attraction between them grew harder to ignore. Lingering glances, accidental touches, conversations that stretched long past when they should have ended. Zara found herself dressing more carefully for their meetings, checking her reflection before she saw him. She caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what he was doing, wanting to share small observations with him. It was terrifying and exhilarating, and she didn't know what to do with it. Maya was no help. "Just kiss him already," she advised. "The man is clearly into you." "He's my client, sort of. It's complicated." "Life is complicated. Love is complicated. That doesn't mean you avoid it." "Who said anything about love?" Maya just looked at her knowingly. The shift happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. They were supposed to meet to review contractor bids for the first garden, but the coffee shop they'd planned on was inexplicably closed. James suggested his place, instead a penthouse apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Zara tried not to gawk as she stepped inside. The space was modern but warm, with exposed brick and hardwood floors, and plants, dozens of them, far more than she'd expected. "You have plants," she said, surprised. "I tried to take your advice about bringing life into spaces," James said, looking almost sheepish. "I probably didn't do it right. I think that ficus hates me." Zara examined the tree in question, which was indeed looking unhappy. It's getting too much direct light here, and you're overwatering. See how the leaves are yellowing? I thought plants needed lots of water. Not all plants, and never on a schedule you have to check the soil, understand what each plant needs individually. She was already in consultant mode, moving from plant to plant, assessing conditions. This orchid is doing okay, though it needs a better pot. The snake plant is practically indestructible, so good choice there. But this herb garden, she touched the wilting basil. When did you water this? This morning. The soil's dry as dust. I swear I watered it. She looked at the pot more closely and started laughing. James, there's no drainage hole. The water's just sitting at the bottom while the roots stay dry up top. He ran a hand through his hair, embarrassed. I really don't know what I'm doing. It's okay. Most people don't. That's why they hire people like me. She smiled at him. Want me to help you fix these? They spent the next hour repotting plants, adjusting positions, establishing proper care routines. Zara talked him through each step, and James listened intently, asking questions, his hands surprisingly competent once he understood what to do. They worked side by side at his kitchen counter, soil scattered across newspaper, the rain drumming against the windows. Why is this so satisfying? James asked as they settled a newly repotted fern into its home. Because you're taking care of something, making it better. There's something fundamentally satisfying about that. Is that why you do this? The satisfaction, partly, but also because plants teach you patience and attention. You can't rush growth, you can't force blooms, you just provide the right conditions and wait and trust. I'm not good at waiting. I noticed, Zara said, her voice teasing. James looked at her, his hands stilling in the soil. What does that mean? Just that you're the kind of person who makes things happen. You see something you want and you go after it. Is that bad? No, just different from me. I tend to hold back, wait, doubt. I've noticed, he said softly, echoing her words. You're brilliant and talented, and you act like your lucky people let you in the room. Zara's throat tightened. We should look at those contractor bids. Zara, wait. James moved closer, and suddenly the kitchen felt very small. Can I ask you something? Why did you say yes to this project? Really? She could have given him a safe answer about professional opportunity and career growth. Instead, she found herself telling the truth. Because when I'm around you, I feel like maybe I could be the person you seem to think I am. You already are that person. You don't know that. You barely know me. I know you spent 8 months saving an orchid everyone else had given up on. I know you talk about plants like they're individuals with personalities. I know you notice the small things, the way light hits a space, which direction the wind comes from. I know you downplay every accomplishment and apologize for taking up space. I know when you're passionate about something, your whole face lights up and you forget to be self-conscious. He paused. And I know I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment I saw you in that greenhouse. James, tell me I'm reading this wrong and I'll back off. Tell me this is just professional and I'll respect that. But if there's any chance you feel this too, Zara kissed him. She didn't let herself think about it, didn't give her doubts time to intervene. She just leaned in and pressed her lips to his, and it was like the first time a plant she'd been nurturing finally bloomed, surprising and perfect and exactly right. James responded immediately, his hands coming up to cup her face, gentle but sure. The kiss deepened, and Zara felt something unlock inside her, some tightly held fear loosening its grip. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, James rested his forehead against hers. I was hoping you'd do that, he murmured. I'm not normally that bold. Maybe you're bolder than you think. They stood there in his kitchen, surrounded by repotted plants and scattered soil, and Zara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, terrifying, wonderful hope. The relationship that followed was unlike anything Zara had experienced. James was attentive but not overwhelming, giving her space while making it clear he was serious about her. He texted her good morning and asked about her day. He learned the names of all her coworkers and remembered details she mentioned in passing. When she had a bad day at the Botanical Gardens, he showed up with her favorite takeout and listened without trying to fix everything. But dating a millionaire came with complications she hadn't anticipated. The first time he took her to a nice restaurant, she felt underdressed and out of place despite his reassurances. When his friends invited them to a yacht party, she spent the entire time feeling like an imposter. The wealth gap between them was a constant background hum of anxiety. "This isn't real life," she said one evening as they left a gallery opening where people had been casually discussing their vacation homes and investment portfolios. "This world you live in, I don't fit here." "I don't care about this world," James said. "Half these people are boring as hell. I'd rather spend an evening with you in a greenhouse than at 100 of these events." "But it's your life." "No, it's my circumstance. There's a difference." He pulled her close as they walked down the street. "Zara, I have money, that's a fact, but it doesn't define what matters to me." "You matter to me. What we're building together matters." The first garden project was coming together beautifully. Zara had thrown herself into the work with a passion that surprised even her. She negotiated with contractors, coordinated with community groups, solved problems as they arose. James watched her lead meetings with growing confidence, saw her defend her design choices with conviction. She was blooming, just like her plants. "You're a natural leader," he told her after she'd run a particularly contentious meeting with neighborhood stakeholders. "I just didn't want them to ruin the design with that ridiculous fountain idea. You stood your ground. You presented your reasoning clearly and won them over. That's leadership. I was terrified the whole time. Confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear." She thought about that a lot in the following weeks. She was terrified most of the time around James, terrified of not being enough, of him realizing she was ordinary, of this all falling apart. But she kept showing up, kept trying, kept letting herself be seen. 3 months into their relationship, James invited her to a charity gala his company was sponsoring. It was the kind of event Zara had been avoiding: black tie, high profile, full of the wealthy elite. But James asked if she'd go as his date, making it clear it mattered to him, and she found herself saying yes. The night of the gala, she stood in front of her closet in complete panic. She owned exactly one fancy dress, bought for a wedding 2 years ago, and it felt all wrong. Maya showed up like a fairy godmother with 3 dress options and makeup skills Zara could never master. "You're going to look stunning," Maya insisted, zipping Zara into a deep emerald dress that somehow made her look elegant instead of awkward. "I feel like I'm playing dress up." "You're not. You're getting dressed up, which is different. And you're doing it to support your boyfriend who, let me remind you, thinks you hung the moon. He sees me differently than I see myself. Then maybe his version is the accurate one and yours is distorted." When James picked her up, the look on his face made all the anxiety worth it. "Zara," he breathed, "you're gorgeous. It's just a dress." "It's not the dress." He took her hands. "Though the dress is incredible, it's you, you're radiant." The gala was held in a historic hotel ballroom, all crystal chandeliers and marble columns. Zara felt her confidence wavering as they entered, surrounded by women in designer gowns and men in expensive tuxedos. But James kept her close, introducing her to people with genuine pride. "This is Zara Matthews. She's the landscape architect leading our foundation's urban garden initiative. Not his girlfriend, not just someone he was dating. He introduced her by her work, by her accomplishments, giving her credibility and respect. She started to relax, even enjoying some of the conversations. An urban planner wanted to discuss her drought-resistant design strategies. A city council member asked about expanding the project to other neighborhoods. People were taking her seriously, treating her expertise with respect. Then she overheard a conversation in the bathroom. Two women touching up their makeup, voices carrying over the stall doors. "Who's James Quincy with tonight? I don't recognize her. No idea. Not his usual type, that's for sure. She seems nice, but I mean, come on. She looks like she's never been to one of these things before. Probably one of his charity cases. You know James, always trying to save something." Zara stood frozen in the stall, the words hitting like physical blows. A charity case. Of course that's what they'd think. What else would explain why someone like James was with someone like her? She composed herself, waited for the women to leave, then slipped out and found a balcony where she could breathe. The night air was cool and she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to rebuild the confidence that had shattered with a few careless words. "There you are," James stepped onto the balcony. "I've been looking for you. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, just needed air." He studied her face, seeing through the lie immediately. "What happened?" "Nothing. I don't belong here, James. What are you talking about? This world, these people?" "I heard some women in the bathroom. They called me your charity case." James's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. "Who said that?" "It doesn't matter. They're not wrong. They're completely wrong." He moved in front of her, demanding her attention. "Zara, listen to me. You're not a charity case. You're the woman I'm falling in love with. You're brilliant and talented, and you belong anywhere you choose to be." The words "falling in love" hung between them, neither of them having said anything like that before. "You can't love me," Zara whispered. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you're kind and passionate, and you see beauty where others see problems. I know you care deeply about your work, and you're harder on yourself than anyone else could ever be. I know when you're nervous you touch your hair. I know you take your coffee with too much cream and you hum when you're focusing. I know 100 small things that add up to someone extraordinary. I'm not extraordinary, I'm average. I work hard, but that doesn't make me special. Why don't you see yourself the way I see you?" The frustration in his voice was clear. "What would it take for you to believe you're worthy of good things, of love, of success?" "I don't know," she said, and she meant it. "I don't know how to believe that." James pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Then let me be your mirror. When you look at yourself and see someone lacking, I'll tell you what I see. I see a queen, Zara. Someone strong and capable and deserving of every good thing this world has to offer. Even when you can't see it yourself, I'll see it. I'll remind you until you believe it." She clung to him, wanting desperately to believe his words but feeling the weight of her own doubts pressing down. "What if you're wrong? What if you're seeing something that isn't there?" "I'm not wrong." He pulled back to look at her. "But I can't force you to see yourself differently. That's work you have to do. I just hope you'll let me support you while you do it." They left the gala shortly after, driving back to Zara's apartment in weighted silence. She felt like she was standing at a crossroads. She could let fear win and push James away, protecting herself from the inevitable disappointment when he realized she wasn't who he thought she was. Or she could take the terrifying step of trusting him, trusting herself. "You want to come up?" she asked when they pulled up to her building. James looked at her carefully. "Are you sure?" She wasn't sure of anything except that she didn't want the night to end like this. "Yes." Her apartment was small, especially compared to his penthouse, filled with plants and books and mismatched furniture from thrift stores. She'd always been self-conscious about it, but James looked around with genuine interest. "This is perfect," he said. "It's so completely you." They sat on her couch, not quite touching, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. Finally, Zara spoke. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared that you're going to wake up one day and realize I'm not special, that I'm just someone ordinary who got lucky. And it's going to hurt so much worse because I'll have let myself believe this was real." "It is real," James said firmly. "My feelings for you are real. What we're building together is real. But what if I disappoint you? You won't. You can't know that. You're right. I can't promise I'll never be disappointed or frustrated or that we'll never fight. That's not how relationships work. But I can promise that my feelings aren't based on some idealized fantasy. I see you, Zara, the real you. The you that doubts herself and sometimes can't take a compliment and gets dirt under her fingernails and forgets to eat lunch when she's focused on a project. I see all of it, and I'm falling in love with all of it." Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be loved like this." "Then we'll figure it out together." James reached out, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "I'm not asking you to be perfect or confident or anything other than yourself. I'm just asking you to stay, to give us a chance." "I want to," she whispered. "I want to so much." "Then that's enough. We'll start there." She kissed him then, pouring all her fear and hope and desperate wanting into it. James responded with a gentleness that undid her, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Zara felt something shift inside her, not confidence exactly, but maybe the beginning of trust. They spent the night talking, curled up on her couch as the hours slipped away. She told him about her childhood, about her mother's impossible standards, and how they'd shaped her self-perception. He told her about the loneliness of success, about feeling disconnected from the life he'd built. They shared dreams and fears, and the kind of vulnerable truths that only come in the small hours of the night. The foundation's first garden opened 6 weeks later. The transformation of the vacant lot was stunning: raised beds bursting with vegetables, native wildflowers creating waves of color, a small seating area shaded by newly planted trees. The community turnout was incredible, families exploring the space, kids running between the pathways, elderly residents sitting on the benches with expressions of wonder. Zara stood at the edge, watching it all, feeling something enormous swelling in her chest. She'd done this. Yes, with James's support and funding, with contractors and community volunteers, but she designed it. She'd led the project. She'd turned something broken into something beautiful. "This is incredible," a reporter said, approaching with a camera crew. "Are you part of the project?" Before Zara could downplay her involvement, James appeared at her side. "This is Zara Matthews, the lead landscape architect and designer. None of this would exist without her vision." The reporter turned interested eyes on her. "Could we get an interview? Our viewers would love to hear about the project." Zara's first instinct was to deflect, to suggest they interview James instead, but she caught his eye, saw the encouraging nod, and took a breath. "I'd be happy to talk about it." The interview went better than she'd feared. Once she started talking about the garden, about the plant choices and design philosophy and community involvement, the words flowed naturally. Her passion overrode her self-consciousness. When she finally finished and the crew moved on, she found herself shaking slightly. "You were amazing," James said, pulling her close. "I was terrified. You were amazing and terrified. Both things can be true." He kissed her forehead. "I'm so proud of you." The garden received significant media coverage in the following days. The local news featured it. Design blogs picked it up, and suddenly Zara's inbox was full of inquiries. Other neighborhoods wanted similar projects. A magazine asked to interview her about urban conservation design. A university invited her to speak to their landscape architecture students. It was overwhelming and exciting and absolutely terrifying. "I can't do all this," she told James, staring at her overflowing inbox in panic. "I'm not qualified to speak at universities. I barely finished my degree." "You barely finished your degree because you were working full-time to pay for it," James corrected. "And you graduated top of your class despite that. Stop finding reasons why you're not qualified and start recognizing that you are." "But what if I mess up? What if I give a terrible talk or design a garden that fails, or then you'll learn from it and do better next time?" "Zara, failure isn't proof that you're not good enough. It's part of the process. Every successful person has failed repeatedly. The difference is they don't let fear of failure stop them from trying." She knew he was right intellectually, but the fear still gripped her. That evening, she called her mom for the first time in months. The conversation was stiff at first, full of the usual pleasantries that avoided anything real. Then Zara found herself saying, "Mom, why was nothing I did ever good enough for you?" Silence on the other end. Then, "What are you talking about, growing up? Every accomplishment, every achievement, you always focused on what was missing instead of celebrating what was there. And I've spent my whole adult life feeling like I'm not enough. I need to understand why." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than Zara had ever heard it. "I thought I was helping, pushing you to be better. I grew up without anyone expecting anything from me, and I didn't want that for you. I wanted you to achieve everything you were capable of. But you never told me when I did achieve something. You never said you were proud. I thought you knew. I thought it was obvious." Her mother sounded genuinely confused. "You were so talented, so smart. I didn't think you needed me to tell you." "I did need that. I still need that." The conversation didn't fix everything, but it opened a door. Her mother apologized, said she'd never meant to make Zara feel inadequate, admitted she'd probably been too hard on her. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a start. And more importantly, Zara realized that her mother's approval or lack thereof didn't have to define her worth. She threw herself into the new opportunities with James's unwavering support. She gave the university talk and only stumbled over her words twice. She designed 2 more garden projects, and they both exceeded expectations. She did an interview for a design podcast and managed to sound almost confident. Each small success built on the last, creating a foundation of actual evidence against her inner critic. James was there for all of it, celebrating her wins and supporting her through the setbacks. But he also gave her space to succeed on her own terms, never overshadowing her achievements with his resources or connections. When people asked about their relationship, he spoke about her with genuine pride, but always made it clear that her success was her own. 6 months after their first kiss, James took her back to the botanical gardens on a quiet Tuesday morning. He'd arranged private access to the orchid house, the place where they'd first met. The space was peaceful, just the 2 of them among the blooms. "I want to show you something," James said, leading her to the rare blue vanda she'd rescued. Next to it was a new plant, one she didn't recognize at first. Then she looked closer and gasped. "Is that a Rothschild slipper orchid? One of the rarest in the world. I had to call in about a dozen favors to get it, and it cost more than my first car, but I wanted you to have it. A challenge worthy of your skill." Zara stared at the legendary plant, tears pricking her eyes. "James, this is too much." "It's not." He moved to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "But the orchid isn't actually what I wanted to show you. Look at the plaque." She'd been so focused on the plant, she'd missed the small metal plaque on the display. Now she read the words engraved there. The Zara Matthews Rare Orchid Collection, in honor of her exceptional work and dedication to botanical conservation. "I don't understand," she whispered. "The garden's director and I have been talking. They want to create a new position, Director of Conservation and Special Projects. The role would give you oversight of rare plant acquisition and conservation efforts, plus the ability to pursue your own research and projects. It would be a significant promotion, and it comes with a salary that reflects the value you bring." Zara turned in his arms, overwhelmed. "You can't just create a position for me." "I didn't. The director wanted to do this months ago, but they couldn't afford it. I'm simply funding the position through the foundation for the first 3 years, after which the garden will take over the salary. You'd still have to apply and interview like any other candidate, but they've made it clear they can't imagine anyone better qualified." "James, before you argue, think about this. Think about what you could do with this opportunity. The research you could conduct, the plants you could save, the knowledge you could share. Think about having your own collection, your own legacy. You've earned this, Zara. Not because of me, but because you're exceptional at what you do." She wanted to argue, to find reasons why this wasn't right or she wasn't ready. But standing there in the orchid house, surrounded by plants she'd nurtured and loved, with James's arms around her and her name on a plaque, something inside her finally cracked open. Maybe she was good enough. Maybe she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Okay," she said. "I'll apply." "Yeah," James's smile was brilliant. "Yeah," she laughed, surprising herself. "I mean, I'm terrified and I'm probably going to overthink every part of the application, but yes, I want this. You're going to be amazing." She got the position, of course. The interview panel was unanimous in their decision, praising her innovative approaches and deep knowledge. When the director called to offer her the job, Zara cried happy tears for the first time she could remember. The celebration dinner James planned was intimate, just the two of them at a small Italian restaurant she loved, nothing fancy or overwhelming. Over wine and pasta, they toasted to new beginnings and hard-won confidence. "I have something else to show you," James said as dessert arrived. He pulled out a folder of documents. "These are the plans for the foundation's expansion. We've secured funding for 15 new garden projects across 3 cities, and I want you to lead the whole initiative." Zara stared at the papers, her mind racing. "That's enormous. That would be a full-time job on its own." "I know. Which is why I'm not asking you to do it alone. We'd hire a team working under your direction, but you'd be the creative lead, setting the vision and standards. It would mean stepping back from some of the hands-on gardening work to focus on bigger picture strategy. I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of leadership role. A year ago, you wouldn't have thought you were ready for the director position either. Look how that turned out." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Zara, I see your potential even when you can't. I see a leader, an innovator, someone who can transform urban spaces across the country. But this is your choice. I'm offering the opportunity, but you have to decide if you want to take it." She thought about the gardens they'd already created, about the communities transformed by green space and beauty. She thought about expanding that impact, helping more neighborhoods and ecosystems. The fear was still there, it would probably always be there, but it was balanced now by something else. Hope, belief, the growing understanding that maybe, just maybe, she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined. "I want to think about it," she said. "Really consider what it would mean, and if I'm ready, take all the time you need." That night, lying in bed in James's penthouse, she spent most nights there now. Though she'd kept her apartment, Zara stared at the ceiling and took stock of her life. A year ago, she'd been hiding in greenhouses, convinced she wasn't good enough for promotion, unable to see her own value. Now she had a dream job, a collection with her name on it, and a man who loved her completely. It wasn't that the doubts had disappeared. They still whispered in quiet moments, still tried to convince her she'd gotten lucky rather than earned her success. But they were quieter now, easier to argue with, and she had evidence to counter them, actual achievements and successes that were hard to dismiss. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, rolling over to look at her. "How much has changed? How different I feel than I did a year ago." "How do you feel?" She considered the question. "Still scared, but also capable, like I could actually do the things you're suggesting. You absolutely could." "I think I want to say yes to leading the expansion." James's smile was soft in the darkness. "You think or you know, I know." "I'm going to say yes." He pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love how brave you are, how hard you fight against your own doubts. I love watching you bloom." "I love you too," she said, and meant it completely. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for letting me." The Foundation expansion launched 3 months later with Zara at the helm. She hired a team of 5 landscape architects and designers, conducted interviews with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. The first planning meeting felt surreal her, leading a conference room full of talented professionals, outlining vision and strategy. But she did it. She stumbled sometimes, doubted herself often, but she kept showing up, kept leading. And slowly, the voice in her head that said she wasn't good enough started to sound less like truth and more like an old habit she was outgrowing. A year into the expansion, with 8 new gardens completed and 7 more in progress, Zara gave a TED talk about urban conservation. Standing on that red circle, facing an audience of thousands plus countless online viewers, she spoke about bringing life to neglected spaces, about seeing potential where others saw waste. But she also spoke about something more personal. "For most of my life," she said, "I couldn't see my own worth. I looked in the mirror and saw someone lacking, someone not quite good enough. But someone else saw something different. Someone saw a queen even when I couldn't. And while his belief in me was a gift, the real transformation came when I started to see it too. When I started to look at my accomplishments not as luck or chance, but as evidence of my capability and worth." The talk went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments from people who saw themselves in her story. She received messages from women around the world saying she'd inspired them to pursue their own dreams, to fight their own doubts. "You're changing lives," James said, reading through some of the messages with her. "I'm just sharing my experience. You're showing people it's possible to overcome self-doubt. That's powerful." She thought about that, about power and influence and the responsibility that came with visibility. She thought about the girl she'd been, hiding in greenhouses, convinced she had nothing special to offer. That girl would never have believed she'd end up here. 2 years after they'd started dating, James proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or public event, but in the first garden they'd created together. The space had matured beautifully, the plants fully established, the community fully embracing the space. They were there for a maintenance check when James suddenly dropped to one knee. "I fell in love with you in a greenhouse surrounded by orchids," he said, pulling out a ring. "I fell in love with your passion and your kindness and your stubborn refusal to see how incredible you are. I love that you still get nervous before big presentations and that you check on your plants like they're your children. I love how you see beauty in broken things and bring them back to life. Zara Matthews, will you marry me?" She said yes through happy tears, and the ring he slipped on her finger was perfect, a deep green emerald surrounded by small diamonds. unique and beautiful. The wedding, 8 months later, was small and perfect. They held it in the botanical gardens, naturally, in the orchid house surrounded by blooms. Maya was her maid of honor, his business partner stood as best man, and the ceremony was simple and heartfelt. During his vows, James said, "I promise to always see the Queen in you, even on days when you can't see her yourself. I promise to support your dreams and celebrate your successes, and remind you of your worth whenever you forget." Zara's vows were harder to write, but she'd worked on them for weeks. "I promise to keep fighting my doubts and reaching for my potential. I promise to trust your love even when I don't feel worthy of it. I promise to see myself the way you see me, or at least to keep trying. You've helped me bloom into someone I never thought I could be, and I promise to keep growing beside you." There wasn't a dry eye in the orchid house. Their honeymoon was 2 weeks in New Zealand, hiking through forests and visiting botanical gardens, a perfect blend of adventure and their shared passion. They talked about the future, about the Foundation's expansion, about Zara's growing influence in conservation circles, about James's plans to shift more of his business focus to sustainable development. "You want kids?" Zara asked one evening as they watched the sunset over Lake Wakatipu. "I do." "Do you?" "I think so. It's terrifying, but I think I do." "You'll be an amazing mother," James said with certainty. "How do you know?" "Because you know how to nurture things, how to create the right conditions for growth, and because you've done the work to heal from your own childhood. You won't repeat those patterns." She leaned into him, thinking about tiny humans who'd inherit her love of plants and his determination. "I hope you're right. I'm always right about you." 2 years into their marriage, Zara found out she was pregnant. The news was overwhelming and wonderful and absolutely terrifying. She immediately started worrying about all the ways she could fail as a mother, all the ways her old insecurities could damage her child. "What if I'm like my mom?" she asked James in a panic. "What if I make them feel like they're never good enough?" "You won't," he said firmly. "You know what that feels like, and you'd never inflict it on someone else, especially our child. And if you ever catch yourself slipping into old patterns, I'll be there to remind you. We'll do this together." The pregnancy was healthy, if uncomfortable. Zara worked up until a month before her due date, then finally agreed to step back and let her team handle things. It was hard surrendering control, but also freeing to see how capable they were without her constant oversight. She'd built something sustainable, something that didn't depend entirely on her presence. Their daughter was born on a spring morning, perfect and tiny and overwhelming. They named her Lily Rose Quincy, and Zara fell in love harder than she'd thought possible. Holding her daughter for the first time, she made a silent promise. "I will see your worth even when you doubt it. I will build your confidence instead of tearing it down. I will love you exactly as you are." James was an incredible father, patient and gentle and completely besotted. He took paternity leave, learning to change diapers and soothe midnight cries. He sang to Lily in his off-key baritone and read to her from plant encyclopedias because it's never too early to learn about botany. As Lily grew, Zara saw pieces of both of them in her daughter. James's determination and confidence, her own curiosity and attention to detail. But more than that, she saw a little person becoming herself, unique and individual. When Lily was 2, Zara returned to work part-time, balancing leadership of the Foundation with motherhood. It was a constant juggling act, always feeling like she was falling short somewhere. But James reminded her that doing enough was different from being perfect, and that their daughter needed to see her mother pursuing her passions, not sacrificing everything. The Foundation continued to expand. By the time Lily started kindergarten, They'd completed 42 garden projects across 6 cities. Zara's team had grown to 15 people, and her methodologies were being adopted by urban planners nationwide. She'd published a book on urban conservation that became required reading in landscape architecture programs. She still got nervous before presentations, and still sometimes doubted herself, but the doubts were manageable now, balanced by concrete evidence of her capabilities and impact. One evening, when Lily was 7, Zara found her daughter in the garden behind their house. They'd moved to a place with actual land a few years earlier, carefully tending to a small plot James had helped her plant. "Look, Mama," Lily said proudly. "My tomatoes are growing." "They're beautiful, sweetheart. You're taking such good care of them." "Daddy says I'm a natural. Do you think so?" Zara crouched down beside her daughter, thinking about all the times she'd downplayed her own abilities, all the years she'd spent not believing in herself. "I think you're working hard and learning a lot. I think you're curious and patient and paying attention to what your plants need. Those are all signs of being a good gardener." "So I am good at it." "You are. And even when things don't work out perfectly, because sometimes plants die even when we do everything right, that doesn't mean you're not good at it. It just means you're learning." Lily absorbed this, her small face serious. "Daddy says you used to not know you were good at gardening." "He's right. I knew a lot about plants, but I didn't believe in myself. It took me a long time to learn that I was actually good at what I did." "But now you know," Zara smiled. "Most days, yes. Some days I still forget, but I have people who remind me, your daddy especially. And I have all the gardens we've built, and all the plants I've saved as proof. It's hard to argue with that much evidence." "I think you're the best gardener in the whole world," Lily said with the absolute certainty of a child. "I think you're pretty great yourself." That night, after Lily was asleep, Zara stood in her home office looking at the wall of photos documenting her journey. The first garden project, her TED talk, her book launch, her wedding day, Lily's birth, awards and achievements she'd once thought impossible. And in every photo, she could see it, the gradual transformation from someone who couldn't see her worth to someone who was learning to recognize it. James came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "How far I've come. How different I am from the woman you met in that greenhouse." "You're not that different. You're just more yourself. The woman I met in the greenhouse had all this potential locked inside her. You've just let it out. You helped me let it out. I just reminded you it was there. You did the actual work." She turned in his arms, looking at the man who'd seen her clearly from the beginning. "Thank you for being my mirror when I couldn't see myself, for telling me I was a queen when all I saw was someone lacking." "You've always been a queen," he said, kissing her forehead. "I'm just glad you finally see it too." 10 years after they'd first met, the foundation celebrated its 100th garden completion. The event was huge. City officials, community leaders, media coverage, hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by their work. Zara gave a speech about the journey, about transformation and growth, about seeing potential in neglected spaces, but she also talked about personal transformation. 10 years ago, I couldn't accept a compliment without deflecting it. I couldn't see my own worth or trust in my abilities. Today, I stand here leading an organization that has transformed countless communities, and I can finally say with confidence, I earned this. Not through luck or circumstance, but through dedication and skill and hard work. It took me years to believe that, and some days I still struggle with it. But I'm here. I did this. And if you're someone who struggles to see your own worth, know that it's possible to change that narrative. It takes work and support and time, but you can learn to see yourself clearly. You can learn to recognize the queen that you are. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, Dozens of people approached her with their own stories of overcoming self-doubt, of learning to believe in themselves. One young woman, eyes shining with tears, said, "You made me believe I could pursue landscape architecture, even though everyone told me it wasn't practical. I just finished my degree, and I start my first job next month. Thank you for showing me it was possible." Zara hugged her, remembering being that young woman uncertain of her path. "You're going to do amazing things. Just remember to see your worth even when others don't." That evening, exhausted but happy, Zara and James sat in their garden while Lily played nearby. The space they'd created together was lush and thriving, a mix of ornamental plants and edibles, peaceful corners and active areas. It was a reflection of their family, diverse, intentional, alive. "I'm proud of you," James said, watching Lily chase butterflies. "I'm proud of us," Zara corrected. "We built all of this together. We built a lot of things together. The foundation, this garden, our family. But the most important thing you built was belief in yourself. I was just the scaffolding. You did the construction." She smiled, thinking about the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become. The journey hadn't been linear or easy. There had been setbacks and moments of crippling doubt. There still were, if she was honest. But she'd learned to push through them, to act despite fear, to trust in her capabilities even when her old insecurities tried to convince her otherwise. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You saw me when I was invisible, even to myself. You believed in me before I could believe in me. That gave me something to reach toward. You would have gotten there eventually. Maybe. But having you beside me made the journey possible, made it bearable." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You saw a queen when I couldn't. That changed everything." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Lily ran over, dirt on her knees and flowers in her hands, chattering about the ladybug she'd found and the raspberry she'd picked. Zara pulled her daughter into her lap, breathing in the scent of earth and childhood, feeling the weight of contentment settle into her bones. This was what she'd built. Not just gardens and organizations and professional success, though those mattered, but a life rooted in love and growth. A family that nurtured each other, a sense of self that, while still imperfect, was stronger and truer than she'd ever imagined possible. "I love our life," she said softly. James kissed her temple. "Me too. Every beautiful, imperfect piece of it." Lily looked up at them with curious eyes. "Why are you being mushy?" "Because we love each other," Zara said. "And we love you. And sometimes love makes people mushy." "Gross," Lily pronounced, but she was grinning. Years continued to pass, marked by milestones both professional and personal. The foundation expanded internationally. Zara gave keynote speeches around the world. Her daughter grew into a confident, curious teenager with her own passions and dreams. James shifted more of his business to sustainable development, using his resources to create positive change rather than just accumulate wealth. On their 15th wedding anniversary, they returned to the orchid house where they'd met. The gardens had grown and changed, but the essence remained the same. They stood in front of the Zara Matthews rare orchid collection, now extensive and world-renowned. "Do you remember the first time I saw you here?" James asked. "I remember being terrified you'd ruin everything we'd worked for with your development project." He laughed. "I remember thinking you were the most genuine person I'd met in years. The way you talked about these plants, you weren't trying to impress me or gain anything. You just loved what you did. I was trying to get you to leave, actually. I know. Instead, I fell completely in love with you." Zara looked at the orchids, at the plaques describing her work, at the legacy she'd built. Then she looked at James, at the man who'd seen her potential before she could, who'd supported every dream and ambition, who'd loved her through every doubt and fear. "I'm not confident enough," she said softly, echoing the words she'd spoken so many times in those early days. James raised an eyebrow. "Are you testing me? Maybe. What would you say if I said that now?" He cupped her face in his hands, his expression tender and serious. "I'd say that confidence is a practice, not a destination. I'd say you've built an incredible life and career, but that old doubts still surface sometimes, and that's okay. I'd say I see a queen, a woman of strength and capability and extraordinary talent. And I'd remind you that even when you can't see it yourself, I'm here to reflect that truth back to you. Always." Tears filled Zara's eyes. "Perfect answer. I've had a lot of practice." She kissed him there among the orchids, thinking about the journey they'd traveled together. From that first tentative meeting to this moment, surrounded by blooms and beauty and love. She'd spent years learning to see herself differently, to challenge the narrative that she wasn't enough. The work wasn't finished, maybe it never would be completely. But she was so much closer to believing in herself, to recognizing her worth, to seeing the queen that James had seen all along. "Thank you," she whispered against his lips. "For what?" "For being patient with me while I figured out how to see myself. For never giving up on me, even when I wanted to give up on myself." "That's easy," James said. "Loving you has always been the easiest thing I've ever done. Watching you bloom has been the greatest privilege of my life." They stood there in the greenhouse, surrounded by rare and beautiful things, holding each other close. Outside, their daughter was probably texting friends about how embarrassing her parents were being. Beyond that, a network of gardens they'd created together stretched across cities and countries, bringing beauty and life to spaces that had been forgotten. Zara Matthews had built something extraordinary, not just professionally, but personally. She'd learned to see her worth, to recognize her capabilities, to trust in her gifts. She'd learned that confidence wasn't about never doubting yourself, but about acting despite doubt. She'd learned that love could be a mirror, reflecting truth when your own vision was distorted. And she'd learned that sometimes when you can't see yourself clearly, having someone who sees a queen is enough, enough to keep going, enough to keep growing, enough to eventually finally see it yourself. "Come on," she said, taking James's hand. "Let's go home. Best idea you've ever had." "I have excellent ideas. I'm very confident about that," he grinned. "That's my girl." They walked out of the orchid house together, into the fading light of evening, into the life they'd built and the future still ahead. Behind them, the orchids bloomed in their careful arrangements, each one a testament to patience and care, and the belief that broken things could be beautiful again. Each one a reminder that growth takes time, that transformation is possible. And that sometimes the most important work we do is learning to see ourselves clearly. Zara had learned that lesson well. She'd gone from a woman who couldn't see her worth to a woman who could advocate for herself and others. From someone who hid her talents to someone who shared them generously. From a person convinced she wasn't enough to one who could finally, gratefully, recognize that she always had been. It had taken years and love and relentless practice. It had taken James's unwavering belief and her own stubborn determination. It had taken gardens and orchids and measurable proof of her impact, but she'd gotten there. And now, walking hand in hand with the man who'd seen her truth before she could, heading home to the daughter who'd never known her mother as anything but confident and capable. Zara Matthews felt something she'd once thought impossible. She felt like a queen. Not because of external validation or achievement, though those were nice, but because she'd done the hardest work of all. She'd learned to see herself with compassion and honesty and grace. She'd learned to believe in her own worth, and that belief had transformed everything. The orchids would continue blooming. The gardens would continue growing, And Zara would continue evolving, always learning, always reaching, always becoming more fully herself. Because that's what growth was, not a destination but a practice. Not perfection but progress. And she was finally, beautifully, confidently enough.